Hey everybody and welcome. My name is William Collins and I have a pretty fun and polarizing topic today. So Kubernetes, it's wreaking havoc on the software world as we know it. Monolithic applications, they're getting kicked to the curb. They're going on conveyor belts and they're getting converted to microservices. Except many are coming out the other end as distributed monoliths. And even when done the right way, may not make sense. So take Amazon, for instance, specifically the engineering team for Prime Video. They just released a blog about transitioning from microservice architecture back to monolithic architecture, specifically for their video quality analysis service. So the question I want to look at today is, are microservices better than monoliths? Let's explore. To start things off, I just want to give a brief overview of my background, a little about my experience, and then I want to set the stage, create a narrative, and add some context. Just go over some terminology. And from there, I want to highlight why going to extremes when it comes to technology, saying, hey, you must do everything this way. If you do it any other way, you're wrong. This tends to wreak havoc long term. And last, we're going to get to the conclusion. We're going to come up with an answer, which is better. So I've been doing this stuff for a long time, over 15 years. In the past, I started out in technology around the time VM adoption really started taking place in the early 2000s. And I've been through a lot of major shifts in the technical landscape, from automation actually becoming a first-class citizen to the explosion of cloud computing. Presently, I work for a startup called Alkira. We build multi-cloud network software. I participate in the AWS Community Builder program, and I'm also a LinkedIn learning instructor. So, a monolithic architecture, many of you probably already know all this, but I'm going to go over it anyway, usually consists of a server-side application, some database, and a client-side interface, all of which they're going to get deployed as a single unit. So you could even have a monolith built in the cloud, constructed with cloud-native constructs, and an application running on a virtual machine, deployed with CI/CD from top to bottom. But even though it's built in the cloud, it's fully automated, it's still a monolith. Now, microservice architecture, that's going to break up this application into loosely coupled, independently deployed services. No shared database to see here, folks. Each service is going to have its own code base, its own database, and its own management model. And Kubernetes has emerged is the vehicle of choice for service orchestration here. So, some common criticisms for each of these architectures. I think this is just fair. And some of these are going to be pretty broad generalizations, but I just want to give each of them a fair shake before I inject any of my own observations or opinions into the conversation. So, diminished understanding over time of the architecture. This is a big one, and this is important. And this is when I was working in the enterprise space doing these large modernization initiatives. This is the one that really hurt the most when trying to take one architecture and refactor it to another. Because when you think about it, a lot of large companies, the applications that make them money, they've been around for a while. They've had a lot of software developers coming in the company and leaving that have left their mark on that application, and it's morphed, it's transformed, and it's coupled very tightly with the infrastructure that underpins the whole application. You have a lot of specializations, a lot of different teams involved. Maybe there's a DNS specialist. There's somebody that manages the certs. There's somebody that manages the network, and anytime the application has a problem, you have to spin up a Zoom call with 100 people on it and everybody, it's all hands on deck. So I think this is really the biggest for me, just in my experience, as far as what ends up being problematic. Lack of modularity, thus limiting reuse, replacement of components. This is pretty big as well. Having a specific part of that application that you want to take, update in place without affecting everything else, or even repeating a lot of the stuff, like a lot of the design, take like software design patterns, repeat them into new things. This can be problematic and difficult. Scaling complexity. Yeah, you can scale the entire application, but not specific parts of that application, like specific services. This is a fair criticism. And if you think about just scaling complexity more broadly, like the big critique and criticism for monoliths are, they don't scale good horizontally. So you have these massive, think Twitter or Uber, global scale. This is a fair critique, I suppose. Slower innovation coupled with vastly competitive markets. So, hey, your competition is hard right now. Your competitors, if you have an idea and you don't jump on it, who is jumping on it is your competitors, and they're going to churn it out. And, that's going to bode well for them in the market. They're going to eat away at your market share. So your ability to innovate and update this application, make it more valuable to your customers is critical. And if you can't do that very well, this is problematic for the business as a whole. So microservices, in my experience, I've had a lot of, I'd say, experiences with, in the enterprise space where microservices have been positioned as the end all be all. Like, it has to be a microservice if it's going to be good. Hey, Google does it. Google runs this Kubernetes like crazy. They're doing a great job. Twitter, massive scale, Uber. Hey, we got to do that too if we're going to be good. Not in all cases. So transitioning from monoliths requires a deep understanding and refactoring. And this is, this is huge. So some of the things that I worked on in the past, it's, to say that it's difficult is an understatement. It's like, I'm like climbing Mount Everest in like a tank top, and, there's folks at the top like rolling down boulders on me. It's an uphill battle for sure. And part of that goes back to the first bullet point with the monolithic architecture, like that diminished understanding and all the hands in the cookie jar, understanding everything and trying to do it the right way without distributing the monolith. So distributed nature adds complexity to testing, increased overhead with growth. This is, testing is often, it's talked about a ton, but it's not taken a lot of times as a first-class citizen. So if you don't have good testing practices when you were building monoliths, you're not probably going to have the good testing practices when you build microservices. And testing, which should ultimately become a habit before you're doing deployments. You should write tests almost first before going on to anything else. This is just huge, and it gets a lot more complex when you look at microservices. Visibility and traceability challenges, new tooling, new operations. So the operations teams and how you support, applications in a monolithic style, there's, I know operations is operations, but it changes a lot with the microservice architecture quite a bit. And operations has a tough time. They get, if anything goes wrong, usually it lands on them. And so thinking about their success and, that you're judged by how quickly they can fix issues, having a good operations in place to manage this new architecture is absolutely critical. And that is more, is a transitioning phase. It's harder when you're in a brownfield environment. Greenfield, you're starting out new, you're just building a new product from the ground up, not so much. But anything brownfield, definitely complicated. Increased moving parts create a larger attack surface, many new points of ingress and egress. This is, think of it like, electric vehicles, EVs. So I was talking to someone at reInvent last year, actually, and they were talking to me about, they got one of the first Tesla Model 3s that came out, like the first generation of the Model 3 years back. And they were telling me that all that they've had to do with this EV is get the tires changed a few times and the brakes changed. They haven't had to do anything else. They haven't had any problems. Well, guess what? This EV doesn't have a ton of moving parts in it. If you look at a combustion engine vehicle, you're changing the oil, updating the fluids. You have a lot of things going on, a lot of care and feeding, a lot of maintenance to do to make sure it continues operating at a healthy state. So increased moving parts just get more complex. There's more things to think about. There's more friction, potential friction, obviously. So back to our question, are microservices better than monoliths? Now, I think, words mean things, and making sure that we have the right idea of the word is important. So what does better mean in this context? So what better place to look than the dictionary? So of superior quality or excellence, morally superior, more virtuous. Coincidentally, both of these definitions, in my experience, fit perfectly because a lot of times, microservices are deemed as far superior quality or excellence. It's not viewed as like a technology and a solution, the right solution for the right problem. It's viewed as, okay, this is just better 100% of the time. And then, a lot of the folks that I would have to go elbow to elbow with, and sort of debate this with, they were standing on a morally superior high ground because they had the better thing. It didn't, nothing else mattered. It became like tunnel vision. Microservices are better. So why aren't we doing them? Now, consider the following. Everything breaks. Technology, yeah, you're going to have outages. How fast can an operations team restore service? And if not, if they can't actually fix the problem in real time, if it's not in their power, how fast can they identify the fault and actually escalate it to the team internally or a specific vendor? Finding it, just basically getting that service restored as quickly as possible. That's, if you're running, you have a business and you have, applications that are, the bread and butter of your business. They're driving the revenue and they're down for 6 hours, and some businesses, this costs millions and millions of dollars. That's not good. So getting to the point to where, you have the right operations flow in place, you understand what's going on, and you can restore service is absolutely critical. So the dreaded distributed monolith, built like a monolith, deployed like a microservice. So one of the things that's great about the way that technology happens today, and one of the great things that practitioners can do, is shorten the feedback loop. So when you're building something or you're migrating something or you're transitioning from one architecture to another, you have to get feedback on how it's going. You have to, you've got to really dig in and you have to get this feedback loop going. So one of the things I would do in order to, kind of get this feedback and just kind of start a good conversation is asking the right questions. So I had a few questions I would ask in these application modernization initiatives to kind of figure out, okay, are we really distributing the monolith? How do we even identify that? Because it's something that we don't want to do. We want this to be valuable. We want to do it the right way. So the first question, really usually on the money, are any of our microservices sharing a data store? A lot of times the answer was yes. And is our rockstar developer working across numerous, all the microservices? And not only that, is he also helping build the underlying infrastructure in the cloud, building some infrastructure as code and, working across all these areas, because that person is going to get worn out. They're going to get burnt out and you're going to end up losing them. That's not good. Does pushing a change to one microservice require changes to all the others? If it does, then this kind of defeats the purpose of independently deployable services. So if you get to the point where you're doing this, you may want to reevaluate just, hey, why are we doing this? Are we actually solving a problem? And are we picking the right solution for this problem? So, dealing in extremes. I have a family, I have a wife and 2 young children. And with these children, honestly, I feel like I'm an Uber driver. I'm always driving, sports, school, trips, this, that, activities, always in the car. So as our 2 children got to be a little bit older, got bigger, we had a sedan and we decided, hey, we're going to up our game. We're going to get an SUV. We need a little more room. We want to be more comfortable and we do a lot of driving. So this was a great idea. The one we had picked out, it seats 6 total. So we can fit us 4 and then we have room for 2 more. And not only that, but in the back, there's, a good amount of cargo space. Great. And then if we need more space, it has the roof rack. Fantastic. And EPA estimated 21 city, 28 highway. Music to my ears. Great fuel economy. It fits in my driveway. This is always important. You want to have somewhere where you can park it. And my wife likes the way it looks. This is always a recipe for a winning scenario. Now, I begin to look at these numbers and I think, okay, yeah, this is good. But what happens if we decide to have more kids? I hope my wife never watches this, which she probably won't. But I hope that we future-proof enough in the event that our family grows. So I take this mindset. We could have more kids. Our family could grow. We may need more cargo space. So these wheels, they start turning in my head, and I say, hey, I got an idea. I'm going to future-proof for like a long way out. I'm going to go buy a school bus. This is such a good idea. You know why? 72 total occupants. I'm future-proofing for every possible outcome into the future. Great. Not only that, but outside underbody cargo. I don't know if you've looked in some of these bigger buses, but you look in that cargo area, you could have a slumber party in there. There's plenty of room. More room, definitely future-proofing, for the cargo space. 6 miles per gallon. Ugh. Well, that doesn't sound so good. But it has an 80-gallon tank. I still get, 480 miles per fill. We'll punt that to the future. We'll think about that later on. And it doesn't fit in my driveway. Well, maybe we could park it in front of the house. The HOA probably won't get too mad. They won't kick us out. Or maybe we could just park it in the yard. We'll just worry about that after we buy it and after we actually start doing all the work. Okay, fine. And my wife hates the way it looks. We'll just forget about that. So you can see how I jumped to an extreme. I sort of took this idea that, okay, instead of solving, really looking at it as a problem and a solution, I said, hey, I want to plan for every possible outcome as far as I can see into the future, without thinking about the cost, without really thinking about the details. So you can see this may seem like a really, kind of a trivial or like a stupid example, But when you think about it, this is exactly what happens in technology. A lot of times you'll have leaderships that come and they say, hey, Google's doing it this way, again, with the Kubernetes, or Amazon did this. They wrote a blog about this, or I was at some conference and I saw this. We have to do everything this way now. And it's never that simple. Technology always brings that it depends scenario along with it. So that begs the question, when to use what? Like, what are some sort of like a guidepost for when you should monolith and when you should microservice? So monoliths, if you got a small team and you've got limited resources, probably a good thing to look at. Predictable. Like, if you have a predictable scale, you're not going to be, you're not aiming to be the next Twitter. You don't have this gigantic global scale. You're not, serving just, billions of API requests. The complexity is like you understand it. Okay, monolith. Hey, if you don't have any microservices experience, back to that car analogy. And continuing with the car analogies, I guess, if I decided, hey, I'm going to swap out the transmission in my vehicle. Well, never done that before. I've never even changed oil, maybe. So, I'll have the transmission delivered. I'll buy all the tools, and maybe I can watch the YouTubes and read enough to where I can actually get it done. I might break a few things along the way. And hey, I might actually mess up something so bad that I have to buy another transmission. Well, avoiding all that would be great. So I want to have somebody in my court that's maybe done it before, that can help guide me along. So not having that microservice experience can be problematic if you're looking at this. And at the end of the day, you want to meet business requirements. Technology's there, to make the business successful. And a thriving business means more money that gets circulated back into IT, more investment in people, more investment in tools and technologies. So you want to be adding value to the business. Microservices, hey, if you got a large team, you've got adequate resources, and it's the right solution for the problem, run with it. Let's roll. And you have that horizontal scale, like that gigantic horizontal scale. Maybe you do have the next Twitter or the next Uber or one of these apps, but you have that scale and the growth. You're expecting just a massive amount of growth. Microservices. Hey, you have some folks in your court that have done this before. They understand the operational aspect of things. They've built these out. They've maybe lived through a few problems with microservices. They've learned, and they really have a good idea for how to do it now. Having that experience is key. And at the end of the day, if that monolith that you've built, if it can't support the growth that your business needs, and it's not meeting business goals, hey, you've got to look at something else. You have to look at a new pattern, or you've got to do something. So microservice might be your answer. Netflix published a blog, I think it was back in 2016, about their transition to cloud and microservices. And I think it was by 2013, the Netflix API gateway was handing out somewhere in the ballpark of 2 billion daily requests. Now that's thinking about, the context of scale, and, having a problem like that they had to solve, and why moving to microservices was the answer. That's why. Thinking about the scale of Netflix and the amount of requests, that horizontal scale. So just keeping things in perspective. So back to that question, which is better? So I'm going to pull a major party foul here and answer this with another question. Are apples better than oranges? So, sorry for that. Technology when you think about it. So technology, value and business, they're almost symbiotic at this point. You can't get a budget and deploy technology without a thriving business. And, that business is usually delivering, direct or indirect value to customers via technology. So to execute this beautiful symphony, these three need to work in harmony. So what really matters? Delivering the best possible product and the best possible experience to the customer with the resources available to you while delivering on your business goals. So I know it's hard not to get hung up on the new and shiny sometimes, and we forget that technology is there to offer solutions to problems and create value for business and its customers. Thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it, and I hope this session was valuable. You can find me at William-Collins on LinkedIn and WCollins502 on the Twitters. And I also blog regularly at wcollins.io.